that point, Berlin has been devastated by the war. 90% of Berlin was destroyed in World War II. And in this immediate area, nearly everything was completely flattened. The only structure that survived the Second World War was the Brandenburg Gate. So again, symbolism is a very famous power to a symbol of survival. Fast forward a few more years, and we get to one of the defining dates in the history of Berlin, which is 13th of August 1961. Does anybody know what happened on that day, by the way? Absolutely, well done. It was the day that the Berlin Wall was built, 13th of August 1961, and it changed the way that people perceived the Brandenburg Gate forever. We'll talk about this a bit further, so you can see this spot. Right, can you see the slide? Yeah, sorry. That double brick line marks the exact spot where the Berlin Wall stands, and it stood on this road and looped all the way around us, so it went in between these buildings. So that was where the Berlin Wall was built, and it was built within a few metres of the Brandenburg Gate, this structure that has already witnessed some huge moments in modern European history, now sees the building of the Berlin Wall. For Berliners, this structure came to represent their division. When journalists reported on the story of the building of the Berlin Wall, or just the Berlin Wall generally in years later, the image that was almost always used to represent the building of the Berlin Wall, the Berlin Wall stories, was the Berlin Wall here, and the background was the gate. So that is why for Berliners it came to symbolise their division. The Berlin Wall stood for 28 years. 9th of November 1989 is when the wall comes down, and when the Berlin Wall comes down, this is where people celebrate it. Hundreds of thousands of Berliners gathered inside this square around the Brandenburg Gate, because essentially they are reclaiming their structure, a structure that for those years represented their division, but by joining here and celebrating, they celebrate their unity. So today, the symbol of the Brandenburg Gate still represents the idea of unity, of freedom, of peace at the end of the Cold War. So we're going to talk about the Berlin Wall later and talk about why the Berlin Wall is built. So if you're not sure about that, don't worry at the moment. But does anybody know what side of Berlin we are on? Yeah. Right. Yeah. We are. We're in East. So we're just inside East Berlin. This is the former Soviet-controlled part of Berlin. For those who don't understand this, that's really great. But just to say, this area and the first part of the tour, we're in East Berlin, which is the former communist part of Berlin. And I kind of hesitate to use the word communist because technically it was a form of socialism. The political structure, it was a form of socialism. The reason I say communist is that most politicians, most historians, nearly every historian would call this communism. Okay, so we'll use that term as well today. So we're going to head down the street to talk about a different chapter of Berlin's history, and we're going to see a very, very famous Road to do. Okay? Follow me this way. It twists around, so when it's like this, it looks a bit strange, but it's key valve which means the world. But
I was wondering what was on the other side of that balloon. It was like D what?
Just before we let you know it's really very tempting to stand on top of the block, but you're not supposed to. So please try to refrain from doing that. They actually have these guys, security guards, and their job is they just shout at people standing on the block. And by the way, they shout at you in German. Terrifying. So just be aware of that. But let's go through this way. Okay, so we're going to walk through this memorial in just a moment together, and the only thing I'm really going to tell you is what this is a memorial for at the moment. This is a memorial for the Jewish victims of the Holocaust, and the official title is the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. The reason I'm not going to tell you much at the moment is because we're going to walk through it first, so that you can experience this memorial. And what I would like you to do is try and work out why this design is in place here. What does this mean? What is this supposed to look like? What are these blocks? Essentially, I want you to look at the symbolism of this memorial. How does it symbolise and reflect the history that we're here to talk about, or the victims that we're here to talk about? So we'll take a couple of straight lines and we'll just go through straight to the other side as a group, okay? Okay, just while waiting for the last people to arrive, what thoughts did you have as you were walking through here about this memorial? Okay, we're over here, guys. Any ideas as to any little bits of symbolism that you noticed here?
All like shaped like great outside like a hole.
Okay, okay. Did anybody else perhaps see this, that this looks like a cemetery or a graveyard? You can see that in these look almost like tombstones perhaps. So we're just asking for any ideas from you as to what you think this is supposed to represent. I think there's another comment in the back here. Sorry.
Looks like a maze.
It's a bit weird how the like ground was going up and down in like shorter and smaller. It's quite disorientating.
Okay, I think this kind of complements what you're saying as well. This lady's saying that it feels like a maze. This idea that you feel disorientated, slightly confused. The ground going up and down, by the way, this is something they spent a lot of money to try and make that effect happen. The whole memorial cost about 27 million euros to produce this. And if we think about a maze as well, there's a feeling of being trapped, of almost being imprisoned, you could say. And of course, when we talk about that in this history, we're not far away from talking about concentration camps or ghettos. Anything else? What else have you noticed about this memorial? Right. So I think we look at this memorial and we instantly say this doesn't feel like or look like a traditional memorial. And one of the things we can definitely look at is the fact there's no names here. Why do you think they haven't put names on this memorial?
You can find all the names.
Sorry, go and say yours.
We don't know all the names.
Don't know all the names?
And you can write all the names. You don't have enough places.
Don't have enough?
Places.
Yeah, enough space?
Because
Maybe.
they weren't given identity.
Right. Okay. Sorry, guys. Did you get lost?
No, I purposely.
Okay. So the names. First of all, you're right in terms of we don't know all the names of the victims. Historians believe that about half the names are known. This memorial, by the way, is here to represent the murder of 6 million people. That's the Jewish victims of the Holocaust, and they believe that about 3.5 million names are known. But the other interesting aspect of this is the idea of identity. Jewish people, as they're taken into a concentration camp, one of the first things they lose is their name. They're known from that moment on as a number. A name for somebody, our name, is something that humanizes us. And if suddenly you're not a person, a name, if suddenly you also are wearing prison uniform, so prisoners are given their own clothing, wooden clogs, a cap, their hair is shaved off, so perhaps all prisoners now also look the same. The way that you are perceived changes, and really we can say that this is a process of dehumanizing people. The Nazis did that not just in those aspects, but also in terms of the propaganda of the Nazi regime, to compare Jewish people to animals, to rats, to even bacteria. This is to dehumanize, because if you think that somebody is similar to you, they are the same as you, to then murder those people, psychologically, it's really difficult. But actually, if you think that person isn't like you, if you think they're inferior, if you think they are animals, perhaps murdering becomes easier. Now, I mention this because that process of dehumanization that Jewish people went through is really important in this history. And it's not just important in this history. Groups of people throughout history in many countries across the world have been dehumanized. And what that piece of history teaches us is that where groups of people are dehumanized, the next step is persecution and murder. So identity suddenly becomes very important in this memorial. And something else that we can look at in the memorial is the idea that every block here is unique. So no two blocks are the same. So this is to say that every person that this memorial is here to represent is a unique person. They have their own character, they're physically unique, and their personality is also unique. What else? about this memorial?
I got a sense of like claustrophobia in it.
Okay, so sense of claustrophobia as well. Maybe we can think about the maze idea as well. Claustrophobia. I believe that this memorial does make you feel different than you are when you're just walking around. There's a different atmosphere, and you know, everyone here may have felt very differently as you're walking through here. It's physically colder. We know that. Sorry?
The colour.
The colour is grey. It has a very bleak image. The sound is different as you're walking through. The light is different. So physically, it is different because of the blocks inside there. And just on that note, by the way, as a sort of side point, I suppose I just want to think about what a memorial is for. Okay, what is this been produced for? And this is subjective because lots of people have different opinions about why we have memorials. If it's to make you feel something, then perhaps this has been effective in some way. This memorial was designed by an American architect. His name was Peter Eisenman, and his concept for this piece, what he wanted this to look like, he has never explained this memorial to people. This was finished in 2005, but he refused to talk about this and say, this is what these blocks are, this is what it's supposed to look like. That is a conscious decision that he has made. Why do you think he has chosen to not explain this to us? Okay, so this lady's saying so it can mean something different to everybody. Do you think that maybe if he had said, okay, it's supposed to be a cemetery, let's just say that was his idea. Maybe if we are told that before we get here, when we see this, we'll say, oh yeah, it looks like a cemetery. And maybe that takes away the space that we need to be able to have our own personal reaction to this. And I think you're absolutely right. I think the whole purpose of this memorial is that we do react to it in some way. It's so easy to go to places like this and to not feel anything, to not think about this. But what he's tried to do here is have a space that is different, that is unusual, that is flooded with symbolism, flooded with questions to ask. Why is there a grid system? Why are there trees here? Why are these all different heights? Because by having lots of questions and no official answers, it means probably we think about the questions more. We engage more with this. And maybe that is a more powerful way of producing this kind of memorial. This memorial, by the way, it has been met with kind of a divided opinion. It is quite a controversial memorial. Some people really love this concept here and love the way that this is, but there have been lots of people that criticise this in terms of the concept that we spoke of, in terms of how it looks. And what I hope is just from being here a little bit, you have your own views about not just what you think this is, but also about how you feel about this kind of memorial. Is this been done in the right way? Is this effective for you? Before we move on, does anyone have any questions about this memorial?
The blocks in the middle are taller than the blocks around the edges.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Is that a question?
Yeah, it's a question.
You asked me why they're like that. What's the question, sorry?
Yeah, why are they like that?
Why are they like that? Okay, why do you think they're like that? That's a bit of a teacher thing to do, isn't it? But
well, I had that feeling of like time. The more time went on and the deeper you got into it.
Okay, great. Yeah.
The worse
Maybe
it
this
got.
represents some kind of journey, a timeline, and that's where the persecution was at its greatest. The reason I don't answer this is because I don't know. This is one place on the tour where you know as much as I do now.
Well, you've done this tour a lot. I figured you'd get a lot of opinions on what that might be for.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I have my own opinions about this memorial. The reason I refrained from giving my opinion, which I didn't realise that was what you're asking me as well for my opinion, is because if I was to say, yeah, I reckon it looks like this, or maybe that's what people go with, and I'd rather leave it open so that people just feel like they can have their own views on this as well.
Why there is 2,700 stone here?
2,711.
And 11, sorry.
That's all right. One of the only things that the architect, so we're talking about the blocks there, there's 2,711. One of the only things the architect said about this memorial is there's this amount of blocks, but that number doesn't mean anything. So it's irrelevant. It was just picked as an arbitrary number. Now, the reason that I think, okay, I'm going to get my the reason that I think he said that is because I've seen people on my tours who have asked me that question and then got a calculator out on their phone and divided the number of victims by the number of blocks to try and say, okay, it represents this amount of people. I think the architect doesn't want us to do that here, because if we do that, then maybe in our heads we think we have the answer, we have closure on this. And the issue of that is when we have closure, then we might sort of go, all right, we've done this memorial, and it's almost a box ticking exercise. We've done this. Let's go to Legoland. Forget about it. Now, one of the ways you can judge if this, well, by my criteria of what a memorial's for, is if after being here, if we walk away from this now, and you think about this again, maybe a few hours later, maybe tomorrow or next week, you think about this memorial again, I think this has been effective. If it gets you talking to people, I think it's been effective. And one of the reasons it gets us talking is because we don't think we know the answer. We don't fully understand it. So I think that's why he said about the number of blocks. Don't worry about the number. It's just a random number. Anything else you want to ask him?
You said it's had some criticism. What has been the criticism?
The concept, the idea that, you know, we don't know anything about this. Surely he can tell us. This is what they say. The lack of information around here, the lack of signs. There's no plaque. There's no names. Also, there's the way the design encourages a certain type of behaviour here. And this is something that I see every single day. Probably not today actually, it's been quite calm. But you do get people standing on these blocks. You do get people taking selfies here. You do have children running around in a memorial. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but some people find that really disrespectful. There is actually something that you can look at, which explains this point perfectly. It's called Yellow Holocaust. Okay, it is a guy who has become quite famous recently, who takes images from the internet of people who take selfies here, and he then photoshops them so that it has an image of them sort of smiling and doing this here, with an image from the Holocaust. That's his point. For me, okay, again, I'll tell you my opinion here. That example of what he does here is a bit extreme, because it is just a very photogenic kind of place. It's going to happen. People are going to stand on this. They just, if you don't know the rules, I imagine that you would, not because you're being disrespectful, just because you don't know. So, if that's the case,
How do people stand on them though as well to get a different view of it?
Exactly.
Because being stood at the bottom, you do feel trapped. You do feel, by standing up and actually being able to look over it.
exactly. And my experience here as well, before I was a tour guide here, I used to organise school trips with a group of 16-year-olds, and I would introduce this memorial. I would say, please be really respectful. And of course, within 2 minutes, they're running around enjoying the memorial almost. And I used to get kind of like stressed out about it, but now, okay, the question is, who is at fault in that situation, right? Is it me for not explaining it properly? Is it the kids? Is it the architect for designing this? Or is there no fault at all? Is it okay that happens here? People do drink and smoke here as well. And it gets to the point where it's hard to say where's the line of what is acceptable in a memorial. But this pushes those boundaries, for sure. Yeah. I don't know. I don't, because I researched it. I researched where the money went, and I can't remember exactly the figures out. But I don't know. My take is, I'm just going to technically ask. my take is that this is a place where we can reflect. It's a place that just opens up this conversation, and I think that it is really great for doing that. And I think that's a real virtue, because what I think a memorial is for, it is to help us reflect on history. It's help us say, okay, what are we actually here to talk about? And I think it works perfectly in that way. And by the way, I love this memorial as well. I'm just going to tell you all my views today, all right?
Is there an entrance, a museum under it?
Yeah. So the bigger block, some of you might be able to see, just over there, is where there's a museum.
The museum is.
And it goes underneath the ground, yeah. Which, yeah, it's a really interesting museum for sure. All right, thank you for your comments, everybody. We're going to move on, and we're going to go next to the world's most important car park. Are you excited?
Like a what? Oh yeah. Yeah, like a city of, an entire city of people has been killed. Yeah. Yeah. Really glad I never would have known about all this stuff. It's even deeper over there. That's what they're doing. They're not even scared. You want an extra layer?
I'll be okay.
I'm just tired.
don't know if you all heard me say this is the world's most important car park. And it is one of the most important historical locations, full stop. This is where Adolf Hitler committed suicide, just below the ground where we're standing now. Adolf Hitler's bunker, the Führerbunker, is still underneath this car park, and he spends the last 6 weeks of his life down here. And then on the 30th of April 1945, shoots himself whilst taking cyanide. This is of course a huge moment, not just in Second World War history but in world history, because within 8 days after Hitler's suicide, the war in Europe was over. It was on the 8th of May 1945, and that basically happens here. Above ground here, we would have seen before 1945 Hitler's office, and this is basically the centre of the Third Reich. This is a huge building called the New Reichschancellery. It stretches all the way down for a few hundred metres down Wilhelmstrasse. On Wilhelmstrasse, we're going to walk down this street in just a moment, but this was the Nazi government street. It was the centre of the regime. You would have seen the 4 leading Nazis have their 4 offices on this building. So the 4 leading members of the Nazi Party were Hitler, so his office was here, and then opposite was Joseph Goebbels, his office. Just up the road was the office of Hermann Göring, and at the end of the street, the office of Heinrich Himmler. So this really was the centre of the Nazi regime. And this brings us back to this immediate area here. For all of these reasons, and especially because this is where Adolf Hitler committed suicide, historically, this is a very important location. So the question for you is, why does this location not look important? Mm-hmm. They don't want it to be because what? Right. Okay. Did you all hear this?
Nope.
They were worried about it becoming some kind of memorial for Adolf Hitler. Exactly. This is the issue that we need to talk about, neo-Nazism. Because of course when Hitler dies, that's a huge moment, but it doesn't mean that Nazism dies. And the big issue after the Second World War is, how do you stop another far-right neo-Nazi movement from gaining power? Their answer was to denazify Germany. And this meant that most Nazi-built buildings were destroyed because they were symbols of the Nazi regime. Locations, leading members of the Nazi Party are arrested and put into prison, some are executed. The Nazi symbol, the swastika, I don't know if you've seen the symbol, but that was made illegal, and it's still illegal today. The Nazi Party are banned. All of this is part of denazification. Essentially, it is destroying any remnants of that regime. And this used to be the centre of that regime, and as you can see, you could easily walk through here and have absolutely no idea the huge history that this area has. So in terms of our tour and talking about symbolism, this is the only place on the tour where they have purposely removed all symbols from the area. So in a moment we're going to walk up Wilhelmstrasse, because just to sort of go against what I've just been saying, the 4 offices that were purpose-built for the Nazis, key buildings during World War II, 3 of them were destroyed, 1 of them is still here. And this is where we're going to go next. For this reason, the building we're about to see is very, very controversial. Probably the most controversial building in Germany today. We'll talk about how that one survived in a few moments. Does anyone have any questions here? Let's move on to this.
What can you say? What do you feel about Lucy?
What I'm saying is that should we today live our lives still dictated by Hitler or his Hitler? And I think it's more powerful to say, despite of all this, we're just going to get on by life. Yeah, well, it's not ignore it, but like I say, you know, I want to live here, I want to park my car here, that's nice. Yeah, exactly. It's not in any way kind of glorifying here. It's just we're saying we're not going to let you affect our life. I know that a lot of people feel very strange living in that area. It's just a very personal thing, so maybe, you feel really good about it. It's totally fine. Okay.
The building I worked in, that's depressing. They call their building the Temple of Bureaucracy.
That's probably what that building is too.
Temple of Bureaucracy.
Yes.
It was really bad.
If you remind me, it's not really part of the school, but I can point them out to you. That's like really go past
I wonder what it is, really. You were just saying, yeah, what you were just saying. And then Einfahrt. Berlin Mall, right near where the Berlin Wall used to be. That's what they literally replaced.
Replace the wall with the mall.
There it is, the balloon.
It's in lockdown.
Good. All right. So get over here. Keep going. Sorry. Keep going this way.
She was trying to get so he's big and see him. I was like, oh, sorry. I'm tired.
Deep out. The world. The world. The world. Sorry. It means the. There's a view. You can go up and look at the city.
Oh, right, okay.
I don't know. I think it's.
This is what I do all the time. I take photos and then I run to catch up.
D. You remember that Sideshow Bob episode? Simpson. He's got like the Die Bart Die shirt on.
D-Bird. I don't get
Why
it.
do you have this shirt? Then why, if you're not here to kill Bart, why do you have this shirt that says Die Bart Die? That's in German. That's D Bart D.
I had to try to remember all the stuff that. You just forget it so easy, don't you? Sometimes it's like, sorry. Yeah, just so you know, by the way, the bunker, the Hitler's bunker is not accessible anymore. They've completely screwed it up. That's been the case since the late 80s. Right, we need to have a look at this huge Nazi-built building behind me. This is probably the best example left in the world of Nazi architecture. It's so huge. This was built in 1936 and it was built as part of Poland Goering, and therefore he was in charge of the Luftwaffe, which is the Air Force. So essentially his point, the building in which the bombings of civilian targets during World War II, they were largely orchestrated in this building. So that is why this is so controversial. Because during the Second World War, this was absolutely key, and also it represented Nazism, it represented fear, terror, aggression, and this is a really typical Nazi design. So it really looks like a Nazi building. So going back to this idea of denazifying, surely this building therefore should be destroyed. Now, this building has a very, very unique history because after the Second World War, a new government comes in. And in this area, by the way, it's called the East German government. Okay, we're going to talk about why it was East Germany after the Great. But you have the East German government. They are anti-Nazi. They have to defeat the Nazis. They are anti-fascism. But this building, after the Second World War, is their parliament building. It's the home of their government. And that is a very strange thing. As it's one of the only buildings in the world that has been a Nazi building and then a communist building. Well, why do you think they used this building?
Save money.
Yes, you're right. They didn't have any money. to build new big buildings. God, you used my favourite word. It's a symbol of victory. Great power to show that you've conquered the Nazis. That is probably what they said at the time. But the answer is what? The bunkers. It's to do with bombing though. It's because the rest of the city was destroyed. There was nothing else they could use. So basically, they don't want to use the former Nazi building, but they don't have any money. There are no other big, well-built buildings left in the city, so they have to use this one. So that is why they didn't destroy it. And the reason it's not destroyed today, this is, again, it's quite subjective. Some people say it should be destroyed today because of what it represented. Other people say enough time has passed for it to be okay to use this building. Sorry? Yeah, again, this is very controversial. What is used for now? There's no wind at the moment, but you can see a German flag there. If there's more wind, you can see a shield, an eagle inside the flag, which basically is the flag of the German government. So today, this is still a government building for a unified Germany. And I know that there's lots of opinions about this. What I can tell you is that this is basically the most hated building in German history because it was first a Nazi building, then it was a communist building. Today it's a German tax office.
Yeah.
Why is it not?
Sorry?
Why is that?
Why? Okay, what makes it Nazi? Okay, first of all, so it's the hallmark of Nazi architecture. The size, first of all, you can see how big it is. The whole block. It's built to give kind of a perception of power. Symmetry that's used. The kind of very regimented feel, the straight lines. This is so difficult. It almost feels like a prison. I don't know if you get that. It looks like some kind of prison. It is to intimidate people as they walk past. There's no frills or anything with this building. It is very kind of strict. Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you didn't know that it was a Nazi building, I think a lot of people would say it is actually quite a nice building. Like, the material is really amazing material. Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's go through this one.
Another curry place. Curry at the wall.
Right.
The worst curry.
I don't know why it looks like a Nazi. In fact, though we stopped right there in front of
Oh, yeah, that's where it looks
that looks like a Nazi.
It's like big.
Yeah, this is the site.
I'm actually saying very, very important to our course because we're going to cross this road. And by crossing this road, see the double brick line going across the middle. So that means we're going from East Berlin into West Berlin. Over here is one of the 3 remaining pieces of the Berlin Wall that is still standing. So this is a very kind of unique part of Berlin. The East German government, they sat in this building here, they built the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was officially built by East Germany, which we'll talk about when we come back to the break. Okay, let's over here.
Like that.
Another chance to come through here. It's 很大吗？
You wanna?
We'll stop for a break now, and yeah, you can get some photos of the wall if you like. There's also a cafe here called Typisch Berlin, which is a really nice kind of independent cafe. So there's a not a bakery. There's a currywurst stand across the road as well, if you want to try that. If you've never tried currywurst before, by the way, it's disgusting, but you can have a go if you want. We'll meet back next to the tree here. Let me just do one last thing now. By the way, were you given a flyer today with all the other tours on it? Okay. There's some inside this cafe. Basically, you should be given one a bit earlier, but some of you probably know about the other tours that the company runs. But there's tours to like a concentration camp in Sachsenhausen, which goes tomorrow morning at 9:11. Tomorrow morning, so there's this like this one because it's the most popular one that the company offer, and there's only a certain amount of places on the tour. So if you do want to do that, you have to go into the cafe, and upstairs is by the wall, and it's by a station called Bernaustrasse. Okay, yeah, and if you have maps and things, then at the end I can write unless on the phone. But, what I tend to do as well, I'll wait behind after the tour, so if you have any questions, then you can just ask them. They're just coming, yeah, that's it, and that's fine. So the next thing we're going to talk about is essentially why the Berlin Wall was built. And this is, first of all, a really important part of Berlin's history, but it's also a fairly complicated bit of history. So we'll go through this, and if any bits are not clear, then of course feel free to ask me to explain it again, or ask me questions about this. No problem. I think that's all of us. Okay. So sorry? You are. It's okay. It's okay. 23. We did start with 23, didn't we? That's right. That's what I counted for. All right, cool. Let's go with this one.
Okay. I'm tired, but like, I really want to know more. I didn't do any research before I came here, you know? It's like, let's just go to Berlin, you know? Like, I don't know where I'm at.
We never do.
I've done so much research for other places that have
Come in.
let's see what happens.
Just so that you can see this double brick line underneath the wheels of the car. Because that is, like I said, that's where the Berlin Wall used to stand. and it divided Berlin for 28 years. And just to plant this seed now as to why, it was to stop people from the eastern part of Germany and Berlin coming into the western bit, which is here. Because now we're in West Berlin. 1945 is when we begin this kind of history. 1945 is the end of the Second World War. And after the Second World War, Germany is occupied and really controlled by 4 other countries. So Britain, France, the USA and the Soviet Union. These are the 4 countries that kind of allied together during the Second World War. And after the war, they decide that they will control Germany. They will almost kind of govern Germany. The big problem with doing this is that 3 of those countries believed in capitalism, and 1 of the countries believed in communism. So the Soviet Union believed in communism. So then they had this issue of, should Germany now be a communist country or a capitalist country? And the conclusion to those discussions was that Germany would be both. Essentially, by 1949, the country of Germany has been divided and split into 2 different countries. East Germany becomes the communist country. This is so that the Soviets can control kind of East Germany, and then you have the border, and then you have West Germany. This is controlled by Britain, France, and the USA. Those 3 capitalist countries, they have their own parts of Germany to run, but because they all believe in capitalism, they kind of work together. So East and West. Now, Berlin was divided in a very similar way. And this is something that makes Berlin very unique, because no city in Germany was divided like Berlin was divided. And essentially, the reason that Berlin was divided was because all 4 countries saw Berlin as being the most powerful city in Germany. And so all of those 4 countries said, it's not fair if one country takes the whole city of Berlin, because then that one country will have too much power, too much influence. So instead, all 4 of the countries, they take a small piece of Berlin, just like they took a piece of Germany. This means that the Soviets take a piece of Berlin. Now their piece is the one that we were walking around earlier. That's the Soviet control part of East Berlin. Then across the border, we then have West Berlin. Okay, and then an American part of Berlin, the US control part, British and a French part. And again, in Berlin, those 3 sectors work together because they have the same ideology. And this is why it's easy to see it in 2 pieces. We have West Berlin and East Berlin. That means that that side of Berlin was effectively the communist side of Berlin. This bit here is the capitalist bit. Now, if you imagine that my arm represents the border of Germany. Okay, now this is so that they decided on by 1949 that Germany is now going to be 2 countries, East Germany and West Germany. So imagine that this side over here is East Germany. This is the Soviet-controlled part of Germany, and this is effectively the communist part of Germany, and this is West Germany. Berlin is here. Right, this means that it's about 180 kilometers away from the border with West Germany, the capitalist bit. Berlin is in the communist sector. Everything that surrounds it is East Germany. So, East Berlin, which if you imagine East Berlin here, East Berlin has the ideology also of communism, and it's in a communist state. But West Berlin, if you imagine West Berlin is a little kind of island of capitalism, and everything that surrounds it is communism. It's in the country of East Germany. Sorry. Right, okay, yeah. So that presents a very, very unusual scenario where you have a communist country and then in the heart of it you have a little blob of capitalism. Now, we'll come back to West Berlin in just a moment, because if we look at the consequence, first of all, of dividing Germany, the first consequence is mass migration. And these were people who were living in East Germany for various reasons, decided we don't want to stay in East Germany. Maybe they didn't agree with the ideology of communism. Maybe they just wanted to get across to the west. So there's a mass migration of hundreds of thousands of East Germans that leave here. They go across this border to live on this side, to live in West Germany. Now, losing hundreds of thousands of people in your country for lots of reasons is a disaster for East Germany. Okay, now East Germany, just like the whole of Germany, had been through the Second World War, where millions of people have died, and now they have to rebuild their country, East and West Germany. The first thing that you need to be able to rebuild a strong country is people, to fuel your economy, to work in factories and to produce. And they're all leaving, going to the west. So, in 1952, this border here, this is sealed shut, and it now means that East Germans are told that if you try to cross this border here, then the border guards have been told they can shoot, you can be arrested, and effectively it becomes very, very dangerous to go even close to this border. And this border, by the way, it becomes known as the Iron Curtain, and it was a physical border. There was barbed wire fencing built along it. So now you have this situation where East Germans here, many of whom don't want to stay in East Germany. They are looking for a way out, and the way they can escape from East Germany after the Iron Curtain has been implemented is West Berlin. Okay, West Berlin was a place that represented a different country to East Germany. Even though West Berlin here is in East Germany, it's not part of East Germany. It had its own kind of special status. It wasn't technically part of West Germany, but it was almost part of West Germany. Okay, it was controlled by the same people that were running West Germany. So if you are living in East Berlin, or you're living anywhere in East Germany, and you want to escape from East Germany, all you need to do is go into West Berlin. The border on the Iron Curtain is very strict, heavily militarized, it's very dangerous, but the border around West Berlin is basically open. There was almost no border control. So if you wanted to, you could walk here, stand here. You are now in a different country. That over there was East Germany, this is West Berlin. And you would be processed as a refugee here. You have refugee status, then you'd be issued with a new passport, and your passport would be a passport for Western Germany. And this whole process is really easy, it's very quick, and once you get a passport from West Berlin that says you're West German, you are then flown in an aeroplane over the Iron Curtain to live in West Germany. And that was the process that 3.5 million East Germans went through. And by the way, that's about 20% of the East German population. So 20% of the country have, by 1961, got their passport and then never come back to East Germany. And for East Germany, this is a crisis. If people keep leaving their country in such high numbers, their country will go bankrupt. It would have been also that perhaps communism will have failed. So East Germany realised that the key to the survival of their country is to block people on the Iron Curtain, but also stop people getting into West Berlin and getting their passport. So they decide that they will enforce the border here. The border is enforced on 13th of August 1961 in dramatic fashion when the Berlin Wall is built. The Berlin Wall is then built to stop people from East Germany coming here to get their passport in West Berlin. The impact of the Berlin Wall is of course absolutely monumental. It changed economies, it changed politics, it changed the personal lives of people living here, and it also of course changes the Cold War. This is when all eyes start to focus on Berlin. Berlin really becomes the centre of the Cold War. And in the early 60s, the big fear was a nuclear war, that the Cold War would kind of heat up into an actual physical war. And now it looks like it's going to start in Berlin because of the Berlin Wall being built. And many people were predicting it would start at the end of this street here. just at the end of the street, we're going to follow the line of the Berlin Wall because we get to a very, very famous checkpoint, a border crossing between East and West Berlin. This is Checkpoint Charlie. We'll talk about why that was such an important border crossing in just a moment. First of all, do you have any questions about this? Of the wall is a circle.
Oh, it is a circle.
So it goes around West Berlin. Yeah. So there is no end. Here, the ends are oceans. Okay, the Baltic and the Adriatic. So it really did seal things. Does that kind of make sense as to why the Berlin Wall was built? Any other questions that you want to ask about this? How did Germany feel about it? Is that what you're saying? Not really. Essentially, after the Second World War, there is very little sympathy for Germany. What's the word on it? The most important thing? Priorities. Word. I didn't read enough. The priority after the Second World War is to not allow Germany to rearm and go to war again. Because like I said, this is still an issue of neo-Nazism. And the four Allied forces believe the best way to do this is to simply be in Germany, take control of it. And by the way, the plan was that this would only be for the first few years. But then the Cold War happens. And they can't. And this is it. In the East, in East Germany, people weren't able to vote for a political system. So the lack of, I suppose, perceived democracy meant that there was much dissatisfaction in the East because people are basically told this is how you're going to live, and that's why so many people left.
How did West Berlin get into the West?
Yeah. Okay. So West Berliners, right? This is the weird thing about the Berlin Wall, right? So the wall is built around West Berlin. The people inside the walled area are free to leave if they want to. Okay. So if you're a West Berliner, then it was your right to travel to West Germany. And the way that they would do this, aeroplanes from West Berlin, there's 2 airports in West Berlin, but also you could drive. Right, there were 3 roads that connected West Berlin to West Germany. If you chose to drive through, then you were not allowed to deviate off the road. Okay, so even though you'd be driving through East Germany to get to West Germany, you had to stay on these roads because there was a fear that you would go into a town and put someone in your boot or something like this and take them across the border, smuggle them across, exactly. So it was very kind of militarised, these roads that took you there, and also trains as well. Okay, just remember, if you're in a car, here at the Iron Curtain, there would be a checkpoint again. Oh yeah, absolutely. The checkpoint, they're there to see your passport. If it's East German, it's not going through. If it's West German, you're right. All right, let's get going down to
Yeah, I was over.
Oh, then no. Oh, the wall was just at extreme.
You want to go back?
I'm ready to chill for a little while. Do you want to eat or do you want to just go back?
Let's just go back. Go. You want to go to the
I guess we could do that.
Terrible car. Two-stroke. Worked over. Didn't go very well.
Oh my god.
A lot of years.
Here at this place.
Yes.
It's little chocolate bites again. Yeah, I'm tired. Well, why don't we, when we're done, why don't we get something like coffee or they got parking spaces and everything. Yeah, great parking spaces. Well, I mean, just yeah, but I mean, like the whole idea that they're not on the side of the road, like. Let's go to KFC. There's a Currywurst Museum. I don't know, but that's a Currywurst Museum.
Does?
Yeah, right
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Oh, you're not allowed.
And one of the guys racing so we're just talking about kind of neo-Nazism in Germany and Berlin. It is very much a minority. It is very just to ask about transport beer. So this is their water pipe, it's not so tight. And these are water pipes that where there's construction, which is over here, they pump water out of the city. And so they're only temporary. These will be gone once the construction is finished. But the reason this happens in Berlin, Berlin is really a bad place to start a city because it's really boggy. The word Berlin means bog in Slavic. When they did this, they told the people of Berlin that there's going to be pipes running through the city and it had to go above ground. They said, what colour do you want? And there's actually like a referendum vote on it, and it was decided pink and blue. So you'll see pink and blue pipes. Okay, so this is the border crossing checkpoint Charlie. We're just going to have quite a brief look at this. But this is one of the key locations during the Cold War. Because this was the border crossing used by the two enemies of the Cold War. So the Americans and the Soviets both crossed here at checkpoint Charlie. This was seen as a kind of political border crossing. So this is one of the only places during the Cold War where those two enemies, they meet face to face. Because most of it is taught from their own countries, but here they have the actual physical contact as they pass through the borders. A lot of the tension of the Cold War was kind of manifested here. This is seen as the front line of the Cold War. This way is going into West Berlin. Okay, in fact, technically we are actually in West Berlin. When we crossed the road here, we left West Berlin and went to East Berlin. Right? Then we walked down this way. You can see the line going back just underneath this guy's store. There. So we're back into West Berlin. And when we cross over there, we're back into East Berlin. So at the checkpoints, it kind of cuts out a bit and it gets a bit complicated. But that takes us back into East Berlin. This is West Berlin, and if you remember, West Berlin was divided between a British sector, an American sector, and a French sector. Have a look down the street there. You might be able to see whose sector you'd be going into. You've got the US flags. You've got the sign over there that says you're entering the American sector. You've got a KFC just on the side as well, and a McDonald's over there. Yeah. So this is obviously going into the American sector, and it was the Americans that named these border crossings. Okay, so Checkpoint Charlie is because it's the third. The first one is called Alpha. The second one is Bravo. So the third one is Checkpoint C, Checkpoint Charlie. So that's where the name comes from, by the way. So before anybody asks me, that man up there is not Charlie. Okay? Sorry to disappoint you. His name is Sergeant Jeffrey Harper, and he was the last US border guard to serve here at Checkpoint Charlie, and he is looking out into the east. Okay, that was his job at the time, to look out into the east. So symbolically, this is where communism and capitalism collided, and that's really what Checkpoint Charlie represents. We are going to walk back into the east, and we're going to see a very, very famous and beautiful kind of neoclassical square called Gendarmerie Markt next. Okay. Any questions here? Yeah. So yeah, and effectively the reason that they're here is to take photos of people and they charge you money for doing it. That's it. Apparently this is their, I heard this a number of times, and I don't still know if to believe this, but this is their day job, and most of them work as mouth strippers in the evening. All right. Anyway, on that note.
But I have to like.
Oh, I didn't bring one.
I don't have a card.
Yeah, I had one. I almost brought it.
Yeah.
I was thinking, oh, I don't really need this, so I just left it. But I literally had it in my hand. I was like, should I bring this? And I didn't. One thing we couldn't use. There you go, so you have an OTG cable. Maybe we'll get one.
But it's Apple. Or is that everywhere? Looks like they have everything now.
I know. every day home,
That is a group.
and then come here. Hey, no one's jaywalking. That's crazy.
Well, it's like Seattle. People are supposed to people are standing in the corners and like, what's going on? Stop it.
Famous Apple store.
Yeah, I've just been asked about this, so I'll show everybody, because you might see something around. Then you'll see this here. This is what we call topping stone, stumbling stone. There are literally thousands of these around, and these are small memorials to victims of the Holocaust. And it has their name, has the year that they were born, the year that they were deported to a concentration camp, so we can assume as well the year that they were murdered. The other thing we know about this person, by the way, is where they used to live. So this person used to live in a building that would have existed here. So I suppose it makes it very personal. I think we even had a comment today about the memorial to Jewish victims of the Holocaust that we saw earlier, that maybe one of the criticisms I've heard is that it feels kind of impersonal. So here we have something that's extremely personal. And I mean, it's brilliant stuff because it kind of, I suppose, it helps to connect with the individuals and helps to picture, their lives a bit better. Because to try and understand something like, a murder of 6 million people is so difficult to do. But understand people is too far away. Anyway.
Trying to get out of the way and I ended up getting
אבא שלו היה הרב של
Oh yeah, that's going around.
Thank you.
could be all the way back at the place, Brandenburg Tor.
Right.
And I don't know exactly where we are in relation to that.
I'm just saying right now.
I'm not sure how many pictures we have.
Yeah. There's a Coca-Cola sign. You see it? Yeah. It's friggin' Long Island City.
Oh, they moved it from Long Island.
No, like it looks exactly like the one.
Oh, the Pepsi one?
It looks
That's
exactly.
Pepsi.
Yeah, I know, but it looks
Yeah.
exactly the same.
It does.
It has the same kind of like, frame around it, and where are we? What kind of people? No. I guess not. You want water?
good. Yeah, it is. Okay. So we're kind of doing a big circle. It seems very pointless now, doesn't it? But yeah, doing a big circle. So I mentioned that we finished pretty close to the gate, so we can get back there. But we're in East Germany, East Berlin, former East Berlin. And this is a square called Gendarmenmarkt. And just have a look at this cathedral at the back here, because it is a very beautiful cathedral, but what it represents is also really very important, because this was built in the year 1705. And the purpose of building this cathedral, it was specifically for French people. Inside this cathedral, all services happen in French. And by the way, they came up with a brilliant name for the cathedral. It's called the French Cathedral. But this was built as a way of saying to French communities, we want you to come here. We want you to feel at home. We want you to feel welcomed into this city. And the reason that's remarkable is because today we have the European Union, where it's really common for people from lots of different nationalities to come here and have equal rights and these sort of things. But at the time, it absolutely was not like that. There was great fear of outsiders coming into a city, a different place, a different country. So this building was essentially saying the opposite to those attitudes. And that's why it's really quite remarkable. And it goes back really to a law that Berlin passed in 1685, and it's called the Edict of Potsdam. It essentially said people of all nationalities, people of all religions had equal rights in Berlin. And it was really the first law of its kind. There's a lot of debate among historians, but some say that because of that law, Berlin became the first multicultural city in European history. And it is true that you have lots of French communities come here, Portuguese, Spanish, Austrian, many different religions came here, different cultures. And Berlin became successful after implementing that policy. And really, by the way, it's a policy that became known as the Tolerance Act, but the reason that Berlin passed it was to try and improve its economy. It needed a new workforce, it needed new skills, it needed new ideas, and so by creating a diverse society, it did that. And Berlin's economy boomed massively because it basically opened up the city to invite people who had skills, talents, ideas, knowledge to offer the city. When the French cathedral was finished, the Berliners, they looked at this and they said, that is really beautiful. Can we have one, please? And they said, yes, and they built this one here. This is also a cathedral, by the way. All services in this one took place in German. Guess what they called this? The German one, yeah. This is the German cathedral. So here you have the French and the German cathedral. You may have noticed that they're identical cathedrals. So, symbolically, why do you think these two cathedrals are identical? Yeah, exactly. This is a statement of equality. Equality between France and Germany, between nations. And this is a brilliant way in which Berlin started to use architecture to try and say, this is what we stand for, this is what we want to promote. In the same way, we have this very beautiful building in the middle. This is a concert house, and it's in Berlin, and they came up with another very creative title for this. It's called Concert House Berlin. There you go. And this is here to promote music, to say, as a city, we think that music matters. We celebrate culture. And essentially what is represented in this square is a movement that lots of other cities were also a part of, a movement known as the Enlightenment. It has such a big impact on Europe. It's a time when people start to celebrate equality, tolerance, openness, music, theatre, opera, and education. Now, education is what we're going to talk a little bit more about in a moment, because we're going to go through to another very, very beautiful square, where we see perhaps the most important university in Germany, historically. Any questions here?
Tell me again what year that was.
This one. This one is 1705, this one's 1708, and this one's 1821. Any other questions? All right.
Camera battery exhausted.
Is it? You're ridiculous. Oh, do you need? I have a charger.
Oh, does it charge USB?
Oh, wait a minute. I don't have a camera charger cable. Yeah, the cable for it isn't.
Why doesn't it take USB? That would be
By the way,
Well, one end takes USB, the other end takes
but
some weirdo
this
USB.
is all recorded I've been asked about this is like a Soviet control architecture. They essentially put a lot of energy into rebuilding the square. And has made them think, why is the British country they were also they're kind of religious. Why would they rebuild these? First of all, the fundamental value of communism is quality, and that's represented in these buildings. But also, perhaps in a more cynical way, essentially, the rest of Berlin did not look like that. The rest of East Berlin was kind of a bit grey, and I don't know if you've seen images of what East Berlin looked like. And this is what historians believe, is that they wanted one place where they could bring politicians, ambassadors, people they're trying to impress, one place that looked great. So they could say, look, our country is doing well, Berlin is thriving. So perhaps slight propaganda that they used in these buildings. Let's move on.
Stick my kid out. He looks tired. I've never walked so far in my life.
Plays close to the last one. My back hurts.
My back hurts.
We need to buy a lot of food and put it in the fridge.
Yeah. It's funny because I was achy before and now I'm feeling better.
The what?
I was really achy before, but now I'm feeling better. Which is weird. I think maybe, like you go into enough pain, your body's like, dopamine.
Yeah.
No, endorphins.
It's trying to keep you out, trying to keep you alive.
Yeah. I didn't realize it, but there's this whole thing, like people self-harm.
Yeah.
Like they cut themselves and stuff. That releases endorphins, so they're in a lot of pain, they cut themselves and they feel better. It's because of the emotional pain by creating such a dopamine. And so it becomes kind of like, it's addictive in a way. thought about it before, and then they're like, oh my god. But interestingly, like, the brain interprets emotional play in the same way it interprets imagery.
Huh.
Fascinating. And the thing is, like, they said there's a study where you even take Tylenol, it will actually affect with emotional play,
Hmm.
which is weird.
What's going on here?
They're rebuilding. I mean, not really.
Crazy. Look at all this.
You need to go through here again. I feel like I just need to start looking at my life. There's so much.
Oh my lord. Look at this place.
Adventure is. I wish it could be the humble university.
So, the last day we're talking about the Enlightenment, and I mentioned that one of the keys to the Enlightenment was education. And across the road we have the Humboldt University, which is historically a very famous university. The first reason it's famous is because 29 Nobel Prize winners have come out of that one university. But also famous because this is where philosopher Karl Marx studied. It's also where, until 1932, Albert Einstein was a professor of the university. So, and he's the person that's probably most associated with the Humboldt. So that's one aspect of the Enlightenment that's represented again in architecture. Another one is here. Today this is part of the university, but this was originally one of the first libraries in Berlin. It was a public library which welcomed people in to explore ideas, to read books, to have knowledge of a range of different topics and different opinions. The next aspect is represented in this building, and this green-domed cathedral is a Catholic cathedral. Now Berlin historically is Protestant, and there have been wars and huge tensions with Catholics, but by building it here in the heart of the city, this is Berlin saying we believe in religious freedom. That's essentially what the Edict of Potsdam was about, that law that we talked about before. We believe in religious freedom and we welcome Catholics into this city as well. This once beautiful building, which is under restoration at the moment, this is a opera house, the Staatsoper. And again, culture. This was a key to the Enlightenment. And that's what this building represents. And this square was basically purpose-built to reflect those values. Now, let's think about the university again, because the university has, again, quite a turbulent history. Just after Albert Einstein left, and you may know the reasons that Albert Einstein left Germany, because the Nazis came to power in 1932. A few months later, in March 1933, Adolf Hitler had sealed a dictatorship by passing the Enabling Act, which means that now Adolf Hitler is an absolute dictator. So there's no fear really from the Nazis that they're going to be overthrown, because now there's no other political parties in Germany. So this is when they feel that they can show Berlin, Germany, and really the world what they stand for. And it happens in the form of a book burning. And this book burning happens in the middle of this square. It is carried out by students from the Humboldt University that were members of the Nazi Party, and the books were taken from this library. We're going to see the memorial to the book burnings, and we'll discuss this a bit further. Come join me through this way.
It looks like emergency housing. It looks like emergency housing. Yeah.
It is.
I mean, it's exactly what it's supposed. That's what exactly what it looks like.
Maybe half a step back from this, so then you can be able to see this properly. This is the memorial to the book burnings that happened here. The book burnings took place on the 10th of May 1933. So again, all of this happened right at the beginning of the regime. Hitler comes to power in January 1933. And by the 10th of May, there's this book burning, which is a very clear display of the messages, the people that the Nazis disagree with. So it represents their ideology. 23,000 books were burnt here, and these were books written by Jews, books written by homosexuals, books written by communists, books about left-wing politics, books about pacifism, books about democracy. These kind of books that the Nazis didn't agree with the messages, they were destroyed for. And the memorial that we're seeing is another kind of quite abstract memorial. It shows actually an empty library. Around the outside walls we have empty bookshelves. Now, okay, there's actually a couple of ways of looking at this, by the way, and they're very similar, but some historians have said the reason that this is so significant, the book burnings, is because it set the tone for the rest of the regime. It set the tone for the future. The other way of looking at this is that what happened here was the warning for what was coming. Just bear that in mind for a moment. We're going to have a look at the second part of this memorial. I've just noticed the time, by the way, we're running just a little bit behind. Is it okay for everyone if we just go 5 minutes over? 5 to 10 minutes maybe? Okay, so and we finish in this square, so don't worry about having a look at this in more detail at the moment. Come and join me at the back of the display. If you can, just stand on this side and just try to see what you say, because even though this is written in German, there is something unusual about this plaque which you will all be able to see. So just keep an eye out for this. Essentially, what you have on this plaque, this is the book burning memorial plaque, and you have information about what happened in the book burning. You then have the dates down there, 10th of May 1933. You have this here. And this is something that I would like us to sort of think about and talk about, because this is a very famous quote, and it's become the quote of the Nazi book burnings. It's written by a man called Heinrich Heine, who was a Jewish writer. The quote here says, "That was just the beginning. Where one starts by burning books, one shall finish by burning people." And that sentiment in this square we know to be true, because at the beginning of the regime in 1933 it started really with the book burnings. Within 10 years it is the people that the books represent who are murdered in the Holocaust. Has anybody noticed the unusual aspect of this?
It's written like hundreds of years.
Exactly.
1820.
Good, well done. So here, they've even included the date. And this is very unusual because this quote is what, you know, if you go to a museum that has an exhibition about this, they will use this quote. Documentaries use this quote. This is in 4 places around this square, but that quote was not about this. When Heinrich Heine wrote that, he was actually talking about the Spanish Inquisition. So it was written in 1820. And this is a really unusual thing. The reason it's like this, in the Spanish Inquisition, there was mass discrimination, prejudice, persecution, there was book burnings, and the result of that kind of mentality, those attitudes, resulted in the Spanish Inquisition in mass murder. And essentially, a very similar thing happened here 100 odd years later. Not the same, but something similar. There's a really brilliant quote by Mark Twain that says, "History does not repeat itself, but history does rhyme." And what he means by this is that no 2 parts of history are the same, no 2 people in history are the same, but there might be similarities. And this for me is the reason that we study this kind of history and that we're here doing this and talking about things like the Holocaust and book burnings. It is that it gives us some kind of perspective on the world today. How do we understand our world? The way to understand is to look at history. Because by looking at history, we can think about where will this take us? What route do we want to go down? What choices do we have? For us, if we don't want to repeat the mistakes of history, the first step is to learn history. So that's what I think it's saying first of all. Secondly, it is saying, I think, to react to history. Once we've learned about something, an event, how does it change us? How do we react to it? And that's a really difficult thing. I'm going to show you one more thing here, and it's a brilliant example of a reaction to history. Draw me over this way. Okay, so I'd like to finish the tour by showing you what's across the road here. Because just on the other side of the road is a book sale. And this is our last piece of symbolism today. This is a symbolic book sale that is organised by the students of the university. This is their way of reacting to their history. It was students from this university that burnt and destroyed books in 1933. So today, how do the students react to this kind of knowledge? This is what they're doing. They're saying, we promote the opposite value. We promote books, we promote ideas, diversity. That is what this book sale is all about, and it happens nearly every single day. So even when it's raining, they put sheets over the books, as this is their gesture. And there are many other ways in which Germany, I think, is trying to confront its history and trying to say we're learning from our history. The reason I would like to finish here is because I think it poses a really difficult question for us, but a very important question, which is how do we react to history? And this is a question for everybody. Today we've spoken about sort of some of the dark chapters of German history. But if we reflect on our own history, and I don't know where people are from, which countries you're from, but almost certainly there are dark chapters in all of our countries at some point in time. And I say that confidently coming from Britain, by the way. So that's why it's a question for all of us. How do we react to history? Last quote to finish on. It's by a man called Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke said that for evil to prevail, all it takes is for good people to do nothing. That is how he reflected. He said that's how terrible things have happened. So I think today that is really our challenge. I want to thank you very much for doing this tour. I know it's a cold day, but I really appreciate you staying here. I hope this tour was meant something to you. If anyone has any questions to ask, like I said before, I'm going to stay here till